Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another episode of the In Focus podcast brought to you by the South Coast Artist Index. And as per usual, I'm going to have our guests introduce themselves and spell their name, please.
Okay, I am Rhonda M Fazio, R-H-O-N-D-A, middle initial M, F-A-Z-I-O.
Okay. Any episodes with your name?
Of course, I inserted the M because if you remember, Laverne to Shirley, Laverne
Laverne and Shirley, yeah.
Laverne Shirley, she had the last name DeFazio.
Yeah.
And if you listen to my name, Rhonda Fazio, DeFazio comes in. So instead of sounding like, some sort of Ron DeFazio.
Yeah.
I said, I just decided to put the M in there and separate the two.
That's, I thought to myself, I'm not going to get nothing out of this. As I remember, I still remember the old Groucho Marx show where there was one episode. I mean, by today's standards, it would be considered politically incorrect, but there was this a Mexican gentleman who came on the show, and his name was Pedro Ramirez. And you could always tell when Groucho thought he had something, because he'd always look at the camera like, oh, this is going to be good. And he said, so tell me, sir, why do you have the same two llast names? He says, oh, it's because my mother, she was a Ramirez before she married my father, who was a Ramirez. So then he looks at the camera, and it's amazing how he addressed the camera, in those days, right? And he was like, nothing. So he says, tell me, Mr. Ramirez, do you have any children? See, senor, I have 10 children. Now he looks at the camera like, oh, this is going to be good. But anyway, it's that kind of crazy thing. So
I think it's a cool segment that you do when you ask people their names and any story next to it.
Oh, well, thanks. I mean, sometimes I get something and sometimes I figure, is it going to be worth it? And sometimes, like right now, it is. And other times it's like, but even with my name, my middle name is Roland. So when my dad passed away, his name was Roland. And I went and I had to file for his death benefits.
Yeah.
Somehow
hey, we have the same name.
There was an administrative screw up, and I ended up getting my own death benefit.
Wow.
Yeah. So let's get rolling. So what are you from around here?
Yeah, I grew up in what was called Southern New England. Now it's called the South Coast.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Berkeley, Mass.
Okay. And you are a I'm
a dying artist. Yeah, like
a dying artist.
Well, no, I shouldn't say dying artist because I've escaped death too many times to even, put that. I can't. Forget I just said that.
I'm so glad you did, though.
Yeah. Oh my God. No, I'm a Dyer Maker. So I specialize in natural color. That's how I began.
Mm-hmm.
When I started, when I began studying art and history, I started as a dyeing artist, a weaver also,
mm-hmm.
textile artist, I guess.
Or fabric, fiber. That was the other term.
Yeah, now over the years it's been like called fiber arts, but when I was beginning, it was the textile arts.
Yeah. In fact, I think at what was then SMU, textiles was kind of confused with the textiles in the textile engineering across campus, because that's how the school started. It was a textile school. Yeah. So where did you go to school?
I actually started school in at Haywood Community College in North Carolina, which is mountain range away from where Black Mountain College was. And some of the teachers there were very much influenced by that college and the philosophy of. It's a cute, sweet little school, and that's where I began.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I started just at the community college level, and they had a program for professional craft, and I was just, brand new to everything. Going to school, I was just, became a mother, and they had a daycare on campus. So I'd drop my kid off, and
Wow.
the next building over, I'd go and I'd hang out with all these amazing people, and just where I began learning my craft.
Well, let me ask you the question that you probably get asked a lot, especially anybody who's in quote unquote craft or crafts. It's sometimes, depending on the source, disparaging or demeaning to be called a crafts person. But yet there are quote unquote crafts and craftsmen, craftspeople, craftswomen, that there is, right out there. I can think of, like, for example, furniture makers, where they're exquisite, they're sculptors, basically they're functional sculptures. How do you feel about that from your point of view, from being a dyer / maker? I'm assuming it's a slash in between.
Dyer Maker,
Yeah. How do you feel about that designation of are you an artist or are you a craftsperson?
Yeah, well, see, there's that thing.
Yep.
A big part of me is an artist, and I think you have to. I'm many things. It's finding the balance between all of these things. And I hope this is answering your question. The difference between craft and art is like the difference between craft and fine arts. Why is there a distinction to begin with? You have to roll it back and look at history, look at the people who are making, the people who could afford to buy and create this canon in art history of fine art versus craft. That's still a problem.
Yeah, it is. It is. I think the functionality is the issue. If it's functional, it's craft. If it's aesthetic, totally aesthetic, then it's art or fine art. And it's funny because in here we refer to it as the fine arts. In Europe, it's referred to the plastic arts. Which is
that. That's,
wow. The plastic arts. And it's much different. Going back to especially you being a dyer, I'll never forget, there was an episode, it was a great series. I don't know if you can still get a hold of it, like, online. It was called The Living Treasures of Japan. I believe it was on PBS. This has got to be 30 years ago. The Japanese government was already feeling the generational pinch. There was a huge gap that was growing between the young and the old. And one of the areas of their concern was the traditional crafts and arts of Japan, that they were these crafts, let's just stick to that, were handed down from generation to generation through an apprentice program. And the kids could care less about it.
Right.
So, because, there are still cultures in other countries who have a concept of Americanism, and that's what they want. They want the Levi jeans, the Coca-Cola, the whole 9 yards. And there was this one woman who was a dyer, and she was the last of her kind. And what this podcast is totally audio, but it's interesting that you're wearing this purple scarf around your neck, because she was the producer of a specific purple like no other purple ever produced. She had the formula that was passed down from generation to generation. I always wondered, was there a dyer of orange? Was there a dyer of green? but that's all she did was purple.
Yeah. Well, purple's hard to get, and purple's very distinctive. But this is my purple. This is Dyer Maker purple. You know?
Now, is it because purples fall into, well, there's pigments, right? Lakes and dyes. Is that how that?
Yeah, lakes and dyes. Well, when you get into the technical versions of dyeing, but the craft, like there's this, there's a quote on my website. It's dyeing is an art. The moment science touches it, it's no longer an art. And the craftsman has to go back to the time before science touched it and begin again. I took that to heart. When I found that quote, that was it for me. It's, in everything that I do, and especially with working with color. At the very beginning of my my art pursuits, my studies, it was about natural dyeing. And at that time in '98, not a lot of people were doing it. It's been getting revived over the past couple of decades. But that specific colors coming from specific materials. I work with raw materials. Like I don't buy things in a bottle already made. That's why I'm Dyer Maker. That's why I'm maker of dyes. And I like that. And it's simple, it's real, and my hands keep touching my work.
I noticed your dyed fingers.
Yes. And that's I'm fine with that,
It's the mark of the maker.
But as for color, this is a genre, a craft, an art that was deeply protected by people, by families, by skilled, makers. At the time, it's still early in the morning. I'm trying to remember. There was like guilds and
yes,
only specialization of tasks. There's only certain people that did it, and they kept those secrets for generations.
Yeah, the Masons are probably the most well-known without people realizing that they're the most well-known, because that was a guild. I mean, the stonemasons had secrets.
Yeah.
I mean, they built the pyramids.
And in the textile arts, the agrarian pre-industrial industry you were killed if you ever spilled the goods.
Wow.
You know what I mean? It's like it was so coveted. It was a coveted information.
Now, just sticking to the purple, I can't remember. I know it was super, super expensive.
Yeah,
and
the Murex purple.
Become it was the color of emperors, and again,
it's Tyrian purple.
Tyrian purple.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been a revival
and that's
of
from a snail.
Exact. Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And then there's a really great book that I read by Christopher Moore, Sacré Bleu.
Oh.
And it was fiction, but it was so believable. Yeah. And it was about blue, a certain blue. In fact, blue was in the news just a couple of weeks ago in December, or either late December or early January, where we are right now recording this. And it's coming out more and more. And what's interesting is that, I'm a fine artist, a painter, and we learned a significant amount about color. One of my instructors was the developer of acrylic paints, Ed Togneri. And yet the dyers, the fabric people, the textile people, the fibers people are leaps and bounds over us in the knowledge of color, because it's not color for application specifically, but it's color of culture.
It's what you have growing around you, what you have available to you, and also, within trade, that Tyrian purple, the cochineal, the indigo.
Well, indigo
grow in different parts of the world.
Yeah.
But cochineal came from a specific part of the world, as did the Tyrian purple. It's not, those two were very highly, sought after colors. And only certain people wore color.
Okay.
That cochineal red or that Tyrian purple, not everyone wore it.
It was it was a class and culture thing because obviously the expense of making it, you had a limited market pretty much.
Yeah. Well, with the Tyrian purple, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you said that you were a mountain range away from Black Mountain, which was, but the influence of Appalachia still existed. And one of the things about Appalachia, one of the things about Appalachia is if you want to really dig down into the arts and crafts movement in this country, well, I shouldn't even say movement, that's incorrect. Traditions that have survived that were brought over on the boats that they came on when they populated. And again, it's if you go from region to region, I'm assuming that even that changes, right?
So interesting that this is a great segue to what my work's really about. It's finding these connections between how color has traveled throughout the world and has intersected in America, in North America, United States. So all of the work that I do is backed up with a story. I love history, love it, love it, love it. And it tells you so much. Making a textile can tell you so much of history and the people that made them, bought them, wore them, whatever. And this is what I put in all my classes and all my workshops, travel of people, plants, and pigments throughout the world and how it intersects with American history. Because in America, we're all from somewhere. And all of skills brought over from Europe, from Africa, the specialization of task and how that, revealed itself in the such as the Highlands in the South. The craft guilds, the craft making in that area is just superb, and it's got a long standing tradition from whence it came, but, and here's the thing, they weren't the first. They weren't the first. They weren't the only ones. There's like a tremendous amount of the specialization of tasks that I talk about that came through the slave trade, and the more a slave was skilled, the more they were worth at the auction block. They brought over the indigo culture that intersected with a plantation owner named Eliza Lucas. It's like, this is one of the stories that I tell. It's like this indigo culture that existed in Africa was one of the earliest economies in, colonial America. And that was started by a 16-year-old girl. That's a pretty big story.
It is.
But it's not told a lot. So these little stories, like reading between the lines and finding that person who did something really rather remarkable, but didn't really get taught in high school or history class. This is what I talk about in my classes. So everything comes from somewhere. And the story that it tells and how it connects to America is something that never ceases to amaze me or hold my interest. But what you're going to see now coming out, and it has been, is more and more of that, that craft that came from Africa. Oh, you see it in the museum in Washington. Beautiful, beautiful works of art that have survived here in the States.
yeah, the story of slavery is still being exposed to the light
Yeah.
from many perspectives. It's not just from one.
Yeah.
I think I read a story about that young woman. She was a rock star. I mean, she was a
Yeah.
slave, but she was a rock star.
No, Eliza Lucas wasn't a slave.
Oh, she wasn't. Okay.
No, she was a plantation. She was a daughter of a plantation owner.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And she was left to take care of these 3 plantations in South Carolina, colony of, and she, as the story goes, asked her father for seeds from the indigo that was growing in Antigua.
Mm-hmm.
And he sent her seeds, and she cultivated them after 3 years and began the indigo culture, like the cultivating of it. And her father sent her a man who was a slave who tended all of it, that he took care of the vats, and that was his thing. In fact, he was called the indigo maker.
Okay.
You know, he didn't have a name. That's how he was known.
I do remember a story though, and I can see the graphic in my head of a young Black woman standing in front of this massive vat that had to be, I don't know, 10 feet wide by probably 20 feet long.
Yeah.
So I do remember that. And I also remember now another story that just popped up about a potter, a gentleman who produced so many pots. It was like phenomenal.
Yes.
And so what it does is proving humanity.
Yeah.
They weren't just burros. They weren't workhorses and mules. They were people with incredible skill sets.
Absolutely.
That has been evidenced time and time again. Now, in New Bedford, this brings the story of color to New Bedford. And when we've been talking color, pigment, dyeing, dyer making, I remember a place on Cogswell Street on the right-hand side. I think there's a place that was a Papa Gino's. You don't see too many Papa John's. Those open and closed. But anyway, there was the Rodman Dye House. So I'm assuming, with the textile industry, there was a commercial dyeing aspect here. But was there anything from the local craft scene? In fact, it makes me wonder, was there a local craft scene here?
Yeah, isn't it? It's a great question. It's also a really curious thought. So, yeah, that'll be something to look into and research.
I mean, we had coopers, we had sail makers,
Yeah.
a lot of the crafts that are associated with maritime. But what about, the ceramicists, and what about the dyers, and
So
what
here's
about
the thing, though, Ron.
Yeah.
This area was, America. It was set up for raw materials. It was Britain that harvested all sorts of materials from here, sent it back to England, had it made, and then brought it back here. It's one of the things I love to talk about is how textiles were a real big player in the leading up to the Revolutionary War.
If it wasn't
the taxes on cloth and textiles, and that's when women began weaving. Daughters of the Revolution, all these, breaking away from Britain. We can make it here. We can make it ourselves here. And this is what many people did. The Highlands, the South Carolina, the Southern Highlands, as they're called, there's an isolation of living in the mountains that, you had to make your own stuff. This was at the time, a new country, even though people were already living here, they had to make so much of what they needed. And, mother's the necessity. No, invention's how does that saying go?
Invention is the mother of necessity. Yeah.
Yeah. So America was ripe for it. And a lot of stuff. It's amazing, actually, when you think
Well,
back.
when you say that, I'm flashing back to Canada. As a child, my dad would bring me up to the family farm. It's like 14 hours away from here on the Gaspé, almost to the very end, 3/4 of the way. And my great grandparents bought the farm around just after the turn of the 20th century, and my great grandfather, as my father told me, built the entire place by hand. I mean, made his own shingles, the whole 9 yards, which is just phenomenal when you see the size of this place. And then I remember my dad, occasionally he would wax nostalgic, and I loved it because that's, it was like putting a hole in something where the liquid would just drain out, a very, very gentle. And he told me, he said, I remember Meme, his grandmother, washed. He said when they did washing, it was a week-long process.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have the modern convenience of the Ringer washing machine, which was the first modern convenience that they had. They had to boil the water. They had to go through this entire process. And then he said, if they didn't have soap, Meme would have to make the soap. So she'd have to collect the lard and then go get the lye. And it was a phenomenal undertaking.
Yeah.
And then I remember reading a marketing report by somebody who caused a bit of a stir by saying that the American housewife does more than 10 times the amount of work that their great grandmothers ever did. And a bunch of people pounced on him. He's like, no, you didn't. You heard what I said, but you didn't listen to what I said. And then he went on to explain that, okay, the average American woman comes home from a 9-to-5 job. Okay, by 10 o'clock, she's got a load of dishes in the dishwasher. She's got a load in the washer, a load in the dryer. She's ironing something. She's ordering something online. Well, back in the day, it was catalogs. And so therefore, not even in an entire day, she's already accomplished more than her great grandmother ever did in that same period of time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. So
But just to go back to the original part of the question, excuse me, when you had asked about if there were craftspeople here, this whole area was set up, the South Coast, the Northeast was set up for mills, for, making, for the textile industry.
Right.
There was no craft in it, the mighty machine was on the rise, and mass production of things. And so craft, we lead into the arts and crafts movement in the late, 1800s, returning to that, because there's this pre-agrarian production, then there's industry, and then going back to the art and craft, not to be confused with, glue stick stuff. Right. That gets, oh my God, art and crafts. That gets lumped into one thing.
Yeah.
You want to piss someone off? You want to piss the maker off? Say you're in arts and crafts. It's
throw some glitter at you. With Morris and the Morris movement and coming out of England, the arts and crafts movement, the Morris Studios, which was a total backlash to industrialism, that people didn't want things that were mass produced. They had no personality, and they not only did they have no personality as an object, but they had none of the owner's personality as well. It wasn't really reflective of the owner's personality, because you've got one, and so do 100 other people have one that looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's interesting to note how that revival lasted for vestiges of it lasted as long as it did. I mean, American pottery, you know, the Ohio arts, and I mean, it's just so much that really in art history, they just sometimes they don't even tiptoe over these things. They just gloss right over them. You really don't get into this.
Yeah, I'm actually an art history graduate, and I loved it. Oh my God, I think everyone should study art history because it just tells you so much of civilization, of communities, people, you know, just life, you know, in what's made or by painting. But you know, the canon of it, it was like arts and crafts, and then it went into oh, what's the next one? Not surrealism, the one before that. I forget.
Oh, well, it's, you know, it's funny. I taught I taught art history for 17 years, and there are moments where it's like, because it's like, if you don't do it every day, if you don't talk about it every day, you lose it.
I know.
Yeah, you lose it. There was Dada, which.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So it was right after Dada, actually. Still can't get it.
Well, Dada was
Art Deco. Art Deco.
Okay.
Yeah. Arts and crafts into Art Deco was just a beautiful. I love that.
That was a marriage made in heaven. That was definitely a marriage made in heaven.
Yeah.
You know, even the Greeks. If you go back, I forgot the name of the first known Greek potter to actually sign their name to a pot, because back then it wasn't considered anything. It was a job. You know, they were throwing pots all day long. And this guy puts his symbol on and says, "I made this." And then that changed everything. And one of the things, I think it's the Targa or Taraga figurines, where they were mass producing deities for the, you know, every good Greek household had a little altar for the gods. Very similar to, you know, Catholicism, which basically a lot of stuff from Catholicism comes from the Greeks anyway, but that's a whole nother story. And beautiful little figures. And then unfortunately, somehow along the way, it's like everything else, culinary, for example, so many of the table d'hote, you know, the high table, the white tablecloth recipes or menu items like French onion soup, or those came from poverty. I mean, who in their right mind who had substantial amount of funds would just make a soup out of an onion? You know, and that the exact same kind of thing happened with crafts that evolved into arts and take it from there. You know, you
use what you have, and you use what's in your environment around you.
Now, do we have a New Bedford or South Coast Crafts Guild, Crafts Association, where it's strictly craft, and crafters is even a spongy word now too, right? Because that means anybody from a knitter. And then again, you keep falling. I keep falling into these holes because there are knitters who are, you know, the penultimate level of their art / craft, or craft / art. You know, do we have a guild?
It's funny that you're talking about food, because I also work with food and this.
Oh, that's right.
Place. What?
You do culinary. That was one of the things.
I don't call it culinary.
All right.
I don't call myself a chef.
Okay. Cucina rustica.
I just know how to make things. I'm very, you know, they're the bare essentials, food and fabric, you know. I love those two things. And
that's a great theme for a show, you know.
What?
That's a great theme for a show.
What?
Food and fabric. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to, you know, get something going here. I've got Interwoven. It's this new space in downtown New Bedford, and it's going to showcase food and fabric, you know.
Wow, really?
The making of.
Okay. All right. What, because, the first question to everybody, I might as well go there. So what kind of food?
Oh, well, it's all related to people that live here
Hmm.
and all the different cultures that exist here. Like I'm Sicilian, so I cook a lot with, pasta and vegetables and fish. But someone else coming from a different part of the world brings that food fusion
Hmm.
and into, where they're living here in New Bedford, how that's changed, how different dishes get adapted. And it's a story of all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Creativity,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. It is. Because I know, for example, minestrone is exactly what
Mm,
it means in Italian, which is it's a mix. And it's
mm.
whatever was
Whatever you
in
have.
whatever you had, exactly, so it wouldn't go to waste.
Yeah.
And
That's it.
yeah,
No waste, zero waste.
zero
That is
waste.
like what I'm all about.
Yeah, in fact, I like to think of myself as a bit of a food historian. I mean, I know more than some people and a lot less than a lot of people, but I always thought if there was a frugality cook-off between the Italians and the French.
Oh,
And there are stories of like, from depending on what region you come from, like for example, French toast, which we call French toast.
yeah,
In Canada, it's called pain d'or. It's golden bread.
yeah, yeah.
But in France, it's pain perdu. It's lost bread.
Yeah.
So, you got the bread. More than likely, everybody had chickens. You put those things together, and bang, you
Mm.
got something that's so totally different. And
Yeah, yeah.
there is an art to that. There is an art to that.
There is.
Um, going back to the question about other
Yeah.
crafts people craft. Oh my God, it's a real tough category. I think.
Mm,
The furniture makers sort of get off easy because they're furniture makers.
yeah,
They are craftspeople, but
yeah.
you can hang your hat literally, on something. And I asked this question of Michael Pietragala, and then David Richardson, if I ever get his butt on the show. He is pretty much a fusion, a crossover between
Mm,
furniture and fine art sculpture.
yeah.
And then unfortunately we lost Elin Noble, who just left
Mm,
with her husband Lasse
mm.
Antonsen. Um, but how many um, Rhonda M Fazios and Elin Nobles and Michael Pietragalas are there really? Because everybody focuses on the painters and the graphics people. And what about you guys?
Yeah, yeah. What about us? Um, Again, that category gets spread around between fine craft, fine art, craft, homesteading now. There's this whole
Homesteading?
new homesteading. It's all of these revival of home crafts, you know. Homesteading. Yeah. It's mm,
Well,
there's so much out there, Ron.
I put
But
that
but
on
here's
the
the thing. Why does it have to be tagged? Why do you have to be called something?
because we kind of love labels.
Mm,
You know, um,
why can't you
it,
just be?
well, exactly. Because somebody who is, for example, advocating for their race, their culture, their craft, or whatever, is now an activist.
Yeah,
So I mean, we
yeah,
really, we really do love to hang labels on things,
yeah. I
and
think it all
then
has to do with ego.
yeah, I think I don't remember the full manifesto, but and I've mentioned this several times on the show, but also when I was teaching marketing, I tell my students who thought that Jay Peterman was a character in a Seinfeld show, and I said, no, he was a real life person. Yeah, the guy in the Seinfeld show. No. The guy in the Seinfeld show was modeled after him. It was a comical. It was a pastiche of the real Jay Peterman. The real Jay Peterman was what they called back then a cataloger. This is before
Yeah,
online. It was catalog sales, and he had a little manifesto on the inside front cover, and my favorite line is, when will American businesses or manufacturers realize that people want things that make their lives the way they wish they were? And to me, that was always like an astounding thing, because he went to a lot of consultants about how to put together a clothing line and a catalog and everything. And he did the exact opposite of everything they told him. And he stood out. And the descriptions of his, it started off with the duster, the cowboy dusters, which is like a raincoat and a duster, because it's so dusty out there in certain parts of the West. But the descriptions that he would do for his items, there was one about a sheer woman's dress. And the description starts off, I remember the first time I saw her wearing this, the light was shining through her from behind her.
That's beautiful.
So right away, it's poetic. He took, you know, we need more of that, I think.
Yeah, well, we're pretty much, you know, ravaged from industry and the aftershock of it, you know, and now it's no longer here. There's a lot of recovering that has to do.
Well,
that has to happen.
When I was living in Portugal, I was astounded.
And joblessness, you know?
Yes.
With that joblessness.
And when I was in Portugal, living in Portugal, I was astounded by the amount of the mom and pop businesses in that city. Nearly, I would say 90% of the businesses were mom and pops in cafes and restaurants. And, you know, I mean, anything in the restaurant industry, from bakeries to bars, there was like one every 10 feet. I mean, they were like chock-a-block. You could go, you know, walk down the section of the street and it's cafe, 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 all the way down the line. They survived. Nobody was looking to get rich. Some of them did. I mean, there was the
that's the thing right there. The rich, you know, here in America, you know, capitalism, and it's how much money do you make and what do you have and all that stuff. Oh, I can't stand that stuff.
Yeah, and the other thing too is the loss of our neighborhoods, and we lost our neighborhoods. You know, what came first, like the chicken and the egg, is that it's that paradox. Did we lose the neighborhoods when we lost our local businesses, the mom and pops?
Yeah, well, the malls came in, Walmart came in, and now, you know, so here's the thing, you know, and again, you talk to any craftsperson, you know, what they're getting at Target is made in another country that they're trying to develop with people that, you know, they're getting work and stuff. Are they getting a fair wage? You know, all that stuff. My thing's is why can't we do it here? When so much of industry has gone away and left people jobless, how can we teach people how to make again?
Yeah.
And there's a big generation gap, two or three of them between the elders and the children, and that information all got sucked up with industry. It just dissipated, not disappeared, dissipated. Yeah. I'm one of those people, and I know there's a bunch of them out there that are holding on to these skills, and they need to be passed on. They need to be taught to the younger generation. And this is where we are right now.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. The essentials of a good life are not how much money you have in the bank. It's how secure do you feel in your neighborhood? How safe do you feel? How financially secure? Now they're using food security.
That's a big deal. It's a big deal, food security right now.
Yeah.
And it will be continued to be a big deal moving forward.
Yeah.
So again, the making comes in. What can you make? What do you need? Can you make it? This is the world I live in. Is
in not a plug for the gentleman who runs the baker, but I think he pretty much tapped two veins. One of them was we need mom and pop bakers. We need, there's a joke between my daughter and I about it. It's crusty bread, right? I was like, yeah, it's crusty bread. It's real bread. You've got to break that bread. You can't, how are you going to break, this other crap that they've got out there? But the other thing is that it's not just now a commodity. He brought the craft of baking back.
Bread making as an art form.
Exactly.
You can see it in the counter when you look at all of his beautiful, offerings.
Yeah.
There's an art to everything.
There is. And there's a
craft. Is it art?
Yeah.
Is it fine art?
Well, originally, Don Wilkinson had asked me, he says, how come, he says, originally when you started the grandma of the Artist Index was actually the Artist Profiles that Jeff and I started. And we started it during the beginning of the Depression, let's just call it what it was. And then business started to kick up, and it was like, okay, we can't mess around with this. We've got clients we've got to deal with. And that's how he grew his business. And but originally it was visual artists, performing artists, literary artists, and culinary artists. Because just for the culinary arts in this area alone, we have enough people to point a finger at. Yeah. Everybody goes to Emerald Lagasse right away. But there was also Anthony Athanas, who was the proprietor of Anthony's on Pier 3 in Boston. And and there are many, many, many others who lent their personalities and their success to the area. But it is all about making.
Yeah, I have to interject.
What's that?
The greatest, the most wonderful people, the greatest makers of food are the grandmothers.
I knew where you were going. I knew where you were going.
I have to say it because all of these guys, my uncle included, he had a restaurant in Fire Island. He used to call my grandmother as he's cooking, Ma, how do you make this? And he's making it as she's telling him. And he's got this restaurant on Fire Island.
Yeah,
what I mean? It's like, I'm giving credit to the grandmothers.
Many years ago, I was a chef at White's of Westport, and I worked with Greg Jasinski, who actually we grew up together in the same block on Collette Street. And he went to the CIA, the Culinary Institute of America, and he tells this story that he's freshly graduated from the CIA. And he wants to make his grandmother, who was his inspiration, his bocce, his inspiration. He was going to make her something, so he gets out an onion and he takes out his French, his chef knife, and he starts, and she's like, hey. Actually, no, it was his mère, because I believe it was his paternal grandmother, his mère. Yeah. And she goes, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm dicing up an onion. Not how you do that. And she takes that little mère knife, that little paring knife, right? She takes off the top and bottom, strips the darn skin off of this thing immediately, cuts it in half, and then does things that would make, like he said, his culinary instructors freak out and lose sleep, right? She cuts the onion in half, puts the onion in the palm of her hand, gets that little paring knife and starts whacking on it in parallel lines, and then turns it at a right angle, does it again, and then starts cutting. And she goes, that's how you dice an onion.
Yeah. I love that stuff. I love it.
It's like
practical.
Well, Jacques Pepin, I was astounded when I saw that man using a knife. That is not culinarily approved, the way he learned things. It was a very peasant sort of way, which he learned from the females in his family. You're absolutely correct. Yeah, we need that. I think, how has this pandemic affected you? As we're going to start to wrap this up, how has this pandemic affected you as a person, a resident, a crafts person, all those things together? Because sometimes it affects you differently or all the same.
Well, I come with a rather large story, but I'll cut it down. I was coming out of, multiple cancers and recovering from some health issues that I had that happened over a course of a few years. Right into now January 2020, getting I'm a artist, so you have to go after money. So I'm writing grants and this and that. I'm getting all of these, yeses in, and I've got everything lined up and I'm ready to go. I've got gigs, I've got all this stuff completely. Oh, I've got a new space that I'm trying to open up.
Mm-hmm.
I had a soft opening.
Nice ceiling, by the way.
Quarantine.
Nice ceiling.
And yeah, and then shut everything. Everything I do got shut down.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, well, I'm back to where I was when I was recovering from all the health issues that I had.
Mm-hmm.
And so how it affected me, I was like, I was still idle. I couldn't do anything. And everything I do is community-based. So, I mean, I lost my grants. I lost a really nice one that I had. And now I'm redoing that here at Interwoven, bringing food and fabric craft together and having discussions, talking. What people need to do is talk to one another. How do we talk to one another? So during the pandemic, I just kept writing. I just kept, tightening up what I was doing. It's given me more time to organize the concept of Interwoven and strengthen it. And now I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting for, where I can open the door safely, because I'm high risk. I'm very limited in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I keep myself very, very, away.
No. Believe me, I understand. We have two compromised people in this house, and I had an issue that sprang up around Columbus Day that was out of left field. I never realized how dangerous it was. If I had, I probably would have freaked out. Yeah.
Better safe than sorry. Just stay put.
Yeah. Exactly.
Figure out what's going on. But in the meantime,
yeah,
I lost lost a very important grant, and I'm trying to make that manifest again post-COVID.
You'd think that they would be a little more flexible considering the situation.
Well, what have they? They reclaim the money and put it elsewhere.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always work out for some people.
Yeah, I understand.
We have to redo it,
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Once we wrap this up and we go off recording, I think this is like a very opportune moment, and I'll reveal it to you. Once this is all said and done, once you get Interwoven up and running to the level that's in your consciousness, to the concept, what do you think your legacy will be of this enterprise?
Of this enterprise?
Yeah, I mean, don't forget. Yeah, don't forget. We've got like Ma's Donuts. People, I mean, it's a donut shop for God's sakes, and people are mourning the shuttering of that business. And we've had so many other places that have become so much part of the emotional psyche and such. Will Interwoven be that way?
Interwoven's going to be a place where I hope it gets thought of and remembered as a place that brought all different kinds of people together. Just like, it reflects all the work that I do. What brings people together? A table, food, doing something together, whether it be weaving or, whatever, embroidery. Bringing people together is important, and especially after we've all been so isolated. Mm-hmm. It's a way to get to know each other, Mm-hmm. So what I want to be remembered for is, there's always room at the table for someone.
Yeah. The Italian tradition alla tavola. That's where it all starts, right?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Rhonda M Fazio.
Yes, that's it.
What's the M stand for? M. Thank you so much. This has been great. And I tell everybody this, you've heard me say it on these podcasts. this is not your one and done. You got to come back, and we got to talk food. We got to talk food. Not that I'm a great foodie or a great food aficionado. I am an amateur food historian. There's so much. So
the thing with food, you don't have to be this aficionado. It's food. It's something you need. It's something we require to live. One gets so freaking fancy.
I know, it's funny. I try to explain
fine art, fine food.
Yeah.
To craft food.
Exactly.
There's that separation too.
It's, for God's sakes, put down that fork and here's a piece of bread. Suck up that sauce.
Yeah. And eat everything on your plate. Don't waste any food. There are people starving.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Thank you. Well, folks, that wraps up not just another episode. This is a great episode, and definitely we should have an applause meter. Who wants to have Rhonda M Fazio back? I do. And with that in mind, as we're signing off, stay safe out there. Use your mind. Use your brains. Be kind to each other. That's all we can ask from you. Until the next time, it's Ron Fortier with the In Focus podcast saying thank you so much for joining us.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Be the artist you believe you are, and let's take care of each other out there.